So I just got back from the fan first screening of The Batman with Robert Pattinson, and I wanted to just give some initial thoughts. This isn't any spoiler territory or anything like that. I'm not going to get into a lot of the plot. I'm really going to just talk about kind of my first impressions, and then I'm going to do a more in detail video later, kind of with more explanation of what I thought and kind of talking about some of the spoilers. But so yeah, I just got done seeing it just now. I went to the Fan First experience, which is the thing that they did at IMAX theaters and some IMAX theaters on the 1st, which this movie's coming out on the 4th, but I thought it was really cool to be able to kind of see it a little early. I've been waiting forever to see it, and I actually remember when I was working at Warner Brothers, they just started filming, and so I was, there's a lot of hype going on then, and it feels like it's been ages since that happened. So my first impressions of the movie, first and foremost, I really, really liked it. I was talking to my family about it, and I wasn't sure. My all-time favorite Batman movie up until this point has been The Dark Knight, and I wasn't sure coming out of it what to think. I was like, is it better? Is it worse? And it's just too different to really compare those movies. They're completely different kinds of movies. Even though they're Batman movies, they accomplish very different things. And so it's hard for me to say. I think it's going to come down for a lot of people, especially comic book fans, when people say, what's your favorite Batman movie, or what would you recommend? I think they'll say it really depends on your preference. The Dark Knight was kind of this very grounded, realistic world with a very realistic take of these characters that was pretty accurate to the comic books. That's why people liked it so much, but with a lot of new twists to try to make it grounded in that realism. The Batman is first and foremost a comic book. Everything that they reference in this movie is from a comic book. Every kind of story interpretation or story arc that they go through has been told at some point in a comic book. And some of it modern, some of it going all the way back to the 1930s with how they portray Batman in this. And I loved that. The cinematography is mind-blowing. The acting is incredible. I will say Robert Pattinson is my favorite Batman, and his suit is my favorite Batman suit, which I thought I would never say after Ben Affleck's suit in Batman v Superman. That was my favorite. It was so comic book accurate, but this is just exactly what it needed. It's that perfect blend of realism, functional suit with the iconic nature of that character all wrapped into one suit, and it was great. There wasn't one character that bothered me, which kind of leads me into the length. It is a very long movie. It's the longest Batman movie that's been made. However, it never felt long to me throughout, and that is saying a lot because there is a lot in this movie. There is just a lot of overarching plots, and then within that overarching plot, there's just these side stories that tie into the main plot. And a lot of times in those movies, especially superhero movies, they try to do that, and it just kind of falls apart by the third act, which a lot of people have said this third act is kind of the Achilles heel of this movie. And I would say the third act has some pacing issues. I told my dad after we got out of the movie that it could have trimmed some fat here and there, but there wasn't one moment in the movie that, looking back, I would want them to take out. Everything that they show and everything that they wrap up, if I hadn't have seen it, I might have thought that there was something missing. There's a lot of, like I was going to say, there's a lot of those superhero movies where they introduce all of these things and half of them don't get resolved. They just kind of fizzle within the main plot. And this one, it was very masterful how they took, the main plot of the Riddler. He's the main plot. And his situation, and as Batman is going down this journey of figuring out this mystery, he's running into these other stories and these other characters who have their own stories. It's kind of like in a very good video game when you're doing an open world. We have an open world situation, and there's a main plot, there's a main objective, but while you're on that journey to finish that main objective, you're running into all these side plots that are people who are affected by that said main plot. And I think the Batman does a really good job with that. like I said, there just wasn't anything looking back on it that I would have. I'd be like, what would I take out? And there isn't any plot point or side plot that I would take out. There isn't any character arc that I would take out. The only thing I can say is within those side stories, I guess, there's a little bit of pacing they could have trimmed. There's a little bit of snappiness they could have added. I think to maybe add, especially in that third act, I think that's where it suffers the most. In the first two acts, the pacing matches the amount of information you're getting, and the story is moving at a really slow but deliberate pace. By the third act, it still does that pretty well, and it wraps up very well, in my opinion. But I do think that trying to tie those up at the same time, you do get these moments that you're like, you know, maybe we could have cut a few shots, maybe we could have cut a few you know, reactionary moments, and or not held on them as long. That's the kind of stuff that that's nitpicking though. I mean, that's maybe the stuff that I would remove, but it never felt long to me. I want to talk a little about how they do Batman in this, because this is the most unique and different version of Batman that you'll ever see on screen. The way Robert Pattinson's performance is, the way they dress him, the way they light him, the way they introduce him. I have never thought that I would explain Batman in the way that I'm going to explain it. And that is, first off, his movement is deliberate and slow and purposeful, almost comparative to like a Michael Myers. He has a very, not lumbering, but it's very heavy and has a big presence, and it's very slow and deliberate. And this is also Pattinson showing kind of him analyzing a room when he's playing Batman. When he's really doing his detective skills and he walks into a crime scene, you can tell he sees every corner of that room within the first 30 seconds, and that's why he's moving so slow. The other thing about this Batman is he is very weird. I mean, and Robert Pattinson said it in interviews, but he is weird. He's not a normal guy, and it makes sense. A person who would do what Batman does would not be normal. And this guy, and you know, when you see him a lot of times in many versions, he's a pretty normal guy. I mean, he acts, his social skills are very normal. His when he speaks with other heroes or other people or other cops or whoever, villains. And his Bruce Wayne is very, you know, he puts on this persona of a socialite, which he hasn't quite reached in this movie yet. A lot of people are complaining about how Pattinson portrays Bruce Wayne, but it's because he's not there yet. The main part of the Batman plot is Bruce coming to terms with things. It's in coming to terms with, what does vengeance mean? What does this lead to in his life? What does this lead to in the overarching mission he has in Gotham? And so we're not there yet. And a lot of people hate when people say that. It's just like with Superman and in Man of Steel, where they're like, you know, that they do it better in the Batman, but where they're just like, he's not quite there yet. This is the stepping stones to lead him to what you know as Batman or Superman. So, but I thought that was great. The sadness and the anger and the vulnerability that is shown in Pattinson's performance, both as Batman and Bruce Wayne, is bar none the best. I mean, I'm so glad that they chose to do what they did with his costume and to do what they did with a lot of the shots that are tight on Pattinson, because he can just tell a story with his eyes in this movie. Everything that Batman is thinking is just portrayed in his expressions, and it's beautiful. It's some of the most touching acting I've seen in a superhero movie, and he doesn't even really do that much. And I think that's what it is, the less is more effect. So that's also great. I'm trying to think of other things. When it comes to the villains, the Riddler, I don't want to go into too much with his plot, but creepy, the most realistic version of taking a kind of a, not a campy superhero, but a very outlandish superhero and flamboyant superhero, and making him this really just insane, smart, manipulative person. And his presence is felt throughout the entire movie. And the music does a good job of that as well. the small undertones for every character that they beat into your head in the beginning, they continue. So you know, if Batman is thinking of something the Riddler's done, the Riddler's music plays. If there's a moment where this Batman is deducting there's something that had to do with Catwoman, there's music playing that's Catwoman related, and that's wonderful. The Penguin, Colin Farrell as the Penguin is I hate the Penguin. He's I think he is my least favorite Batman villain, and he made me like the Penguin because the only Penguin that I like is the very just downtrodden but a lot of bite mafioso who is just getting what he wants by brute force and not charm. And Colin Farrell does a great job with that. Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. She is probably my favorite Catwoman. I need to watch it one more time because a lot of people like to say Michelle Pfeiffer, and as much as I think Michelle Pfeiffer has a really good look for Catwoman, and a lot of her portrayal later in the movie of Batman Returns is pretty good, her origin is horrible, and her plot in that movie distracts me from any kind of performance choice. I wish she had another movie that maybe she could have been that character in. I thought Anne Hathaway did the job fine, but the thing I think that kind of sells me the most on Zoe Kravitz is the fact that she sounds like a real person. I am a little over the female, I am going to sound sexy with my voice because I'm Catwoman. I've seen that. Zoe Kravitz is just a woman who is just a really strong, sexy, ass-kicking woman who just kind of shows her emotions, and I really appreciated that in her character, and I really appreciated that she had a lot of range, and so I think that's what makes her my favorite Catwoman on screen. I'm trying to think, everybody. There wasn't one actor in this that that made me go, ooh, they didn't do so well, or they didn't portray the character that I know, like I've thought of in the comics. They all portrayed him in a way that either subverted my expectations because I've read the comics, or that they were so accurate that I had no complaints. Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to see it again. I can't wait to actually, now that I know what to expect a little bit, going back and just really taking in. There's so much detail within each shot, and there's so much to look at in the background and in the set design and in the cinematography itself. You could take a screenshot from any of this movie and it would make a great wallpaper on your computer, or it'd make a great art piece. It just looks really good. They did you can tell they put a lot of effort into making this movie have its own feel, and it was worth every penny, because you will not see another superhero movie this year that looks the way the Batman looks. You won't. You won't see another superhero movie in the next 10 years that looks like the Batman, maybe besides the sequel to the Batman. The only other one I can compare it to is the Joker. And as much as I think the Batman is a better movie than the Joker even, I think... you were so desensitized to the Marvel method, which I love, and I can't get enough of Marvel. They can keep pumping out movies until I'm 90 years old and I'll still watch them, but the one thing that they lack is a little bit of a style from most of the time. There's a couple exceptions, and the one thing that the DC movies have is they let the directors, they may, from a producing perspective, like to have some studio interference. The Batman did not feel like that. The Joker did not feel like that. Both of those movies were movies that were very intentional, and Suicide Squad, the Suicide Squad from James Gunn, those movies, they were exactly what the director had in their head, and I think the more they do that, the more successful they'll be, the more of a threat they'll be to Marvel, and the more that they will have more successful movies in the future. And like a lot of people have said, I think this movie isn't for everyone. I think it's not like it's all about preference. I think a lot of people would prefer something more like The Dark Knight or Batman Begins or Batman Forever even. But I think for a comic book fan especially, this is exactly what people have been waiting for. And the emphasis on noir thriller, almost horror vibes with detective, lots of detective work, a grand mystery that you are figuring out alongside Batman and Gordon. Like, that's what people have been waiting for since, they announced Batman Begins. And they finally did it, and they finally put a lot of time into it, and it's exactly the kind of Batman I love to see. So it's my taste especially. It reminds me of those old 1930s Batman stories that are very noir, thrilling, with almost vampires in them. Like, it's very similar to that kind of feel, and I just love that. And Gotham is the best it's looked since Anton Furst designed it for Michael Keaton's Batman back in 1989. And it all just kind of came together to make this really just... It's almost like a comfort food movie at this point for me. I need to see it more for sure to be able to say that for certain, but there's a lot about it that it's just like you finally cracked it. You finally cracked what a lot of people have been looking for in these movies. And like I said, if The Dark Knight is more your speed, by all means, it's still an amazing movie. All three of those movies are great. I don't think I'll ever be able to truly say that the Dark Knight trilogy is better or worse than the Batman. What I can say is that the Batman stands toe-to-toe with all three of those movies, and it's only the first one. So we'll really have to see where they go with the sequels. There's a lot that I really want to talk to you guys about when it comes to Easter eggs and slight references that get me excited, and I think they've gone by a lot of people's heads too. I know one thing they've already announced is that they're really looking into trying to do a correct Robin, and I can already tell with some of the character stuff that Pattinson goes through with Bruce Wayne and Batman in this, that he is very open to, or he's very he opens his heart to kids, and he really relates to them and the struggles they're going through within this hellish Gotham, and he really wants to protect them more so than anyone. And with those little hints in this movie, I can see where Robin comes in. There's a couple references that I won't indulge here. I can just say that I could see a Robin showing up. I can see some hints towards another Bane. I can see some hints towards... there's a ton of Batman Earth 1 in this. That's why I say, like, when they talk about references in this, or how it's very comic book accurate, it's very accurate to the 80 plus years that Batman's existed. It's not... They did not adapt one specific year of Batman or one specific decade of Batman even. This is a time capsule for every style of Batman pretty much, besides the camp. If you take out, the 60s show and Batman and Robin and a couple of those, yeah, obviously they don't really do a lot with that. And I like that stuff, don't get me wrong, but that's the stuff that you maybe don't see. But when it comes to, like, the Batman we all know, that's the dark Batman, or the more taken serious Batman, I guess. You see hints within the Batmobile of Neil Adams' 1970s designs. You see some of the dark psychopathic nature of Denny O'Neil's writing in the 70s. You see a lot of Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. You see a lot of Tom King from recent. You see a lot of Jeff Johns with Earth 1. A lot of inspiration from that they've been taking and putting in a lot of Batman properties. You see a lot of the early 1930s stuff, especially since it's more of an origin movie, and there's no origin story, but it's just like the animated series where you didn't have to go through the first episode that just tells the origin of Batman. You're just in a story with Batman, and they're introducing characters and they're introducing villains. That's what this movie is, and that really helps it too, especially with how long it is and how much they throw at you. It's definitely worth that's worth it alone. You didn't get bogged down by the first 45 minutes of an origin that you've already seen. You're getting a lot of plot, and it's a long movie, but all of it is new territory in many ways. So yeah, I can't really say enough about it. Actually, the more I think about it, the more I like it. When I was watching it, I was a little hindered by some of the pacing. which I can still say is I think a little bit of a problem, and I think that's what's not very palatable for some people, especially casual moviegoers or casual fans of this stuff. And I'm not saying they're less important. That's why it's kind of a negative for a lot of reasons in this movie. But I don't think any of it overshadows just how good it is and how much it does right. And I cannot wait to see what they do with a sequel. If they even have another 5% positivity for the next movie, or they get rid of a little bit of the pacing issues, you got a new best Batman of all time, which a lot of people will say this one is. So it's like I said, it's all up to preference. For people who haven't seen the movie, if you're like, will it beat The Dark Knight for me? It depends on what you're looking for in a Batman, because he's been around for over 80 years and there's so many different versions, and I think they've cracked the code quite a few times with him, but not in this way. So it's just another really good take that Batman seems to keep getting, and I wish other heroes can get, like Superman. I wish that they could have. I don't have a favorite era of Batman. I mean, there's so many. They all can stand up next to each other for being amazing in their own right for different reasons, and that's kind of what this is with this compared to the other movies. It stands on its own right next to them, and it doesn't feel derivative in that way. Like, it doesn't feel like they stole too much from the Nolan movies. It doesn't feel like they stole too much from the Tim Burton movies or the animated series. They just took everything that people have kind of been wanting to see that we haven't really gotten to see a full version of yet, and they've done it. And so, I just can't wait to see where we go next with it. So that's my initial thoughts. It was a little long-winded, a little bit more to talk about than I thought. The more I think about it, the more I like to just talk about it, because there's a lot. There's a lot in this movie. There's a lot that it's very, very bloated in a good way. I could sit there and watch another 3 hours in that universe in the same sitting, and I'd still eat it up, because it's the most immersive Batman movie, I think, too. But yeah, I will talk a little bit more about some of the spoiler stuffs in the coming weeks. And follow me on Twitter at StrandedJ. I've been posting a lot on there. I have a lot of opinions on stuff like this, and I kind of just off the cuff, when I'm thinking about them while sitting on my couch, I will post about them. So look out for that. And it's good to be back. Good to see you guys. I hope everyone's doing well, and I will see you guys in the next video.